January 1st, 2026 marks a historic date. Bulgaria became the 21st member of the Eurozone. But is this a page of triumph or tragedy? Here's the paradox. While frustration with Brussels and the constraints of the euro is growing in the EU's richer countries, the Union's poorest country did everything possible to join. Why? And above all, do Bulgarians agree? There are opposing opinions about the switch from the lev to the euro, often partisan. But few people dig deeply into the real reasons behind this choice. We did. We sifted through treaties signed by a fallen king, analysed the real inflation data that frightens households, and examined a European financial architecture that promises hope but may hide traps for its weakest members. Stay with us until the end. We will reveal the true question at the heart of the whole euro issue. Welcome to Amazing Europe. To understand what is happening, we must clear away a misunderstanding. Bulgaria is not a monolithic bloc marching in unison toward Brussels. Looking under the hood, we find a country split in two, cut by an economic, cultural and generational fracture. The latest data from Alpha Research and the Eurobarometer show a rare stalemate in Europe. The country is divided almost mathematically in half. About 45 to 46% of the population sees the euro as an indispensable goal. A slightly larger percentage considers it a mistake, if not a threat. Who are these two camps? The Yes Bulgaria is concentrated in Sofia and in the major urban areas. It includes young people, professionals and entrepreneurs who see the euro as eliminating currency conversion costs, providing access to credit with more stable rates, and simplifying exports and tourism. For them, integration means modernity and definitive westernization. The No Bulgaria is made up mainly of the elderly, rural residents and low-income citizens. Their opposition stems from historical memory and concrete fear. They fear uncontrolled increases in the prices of basic goods and the loss of the last tool of national economic control. But reducing everything to the wallet would be a mistake. Adopting the euro has become a battleground between two opposing visions of the future and of national sovereignty. On one side, the Vazrajdan party and President Rumen Radev advocate a sovereigntist position. The lev is not just a banknote, it is a symbol of independence. Surrendering monetary policy to Frankfurt would reduce Bulgaria to a bureaucratic province without decision-making levers. On the other side, the governing coalition and pro-European forces view the euro as a geopolitical shield. At a time when Russia is exerting strong pressure and instability on the eastern borders is growing, merging the Bulgarian economy with the Eurozone is the only guarantee against sliding into Moscow's orbit. While technicians haggle over decimal points and inflation rates, the real question that divides Bulgarians goes deeper. Does joining the euro mean gaining security or losing freedom? To understand why Bulgaria is joining the euro despite a slim majority of Bulgarians being opposed, we must go back in time to when they learned what happens when a currency dies. The winter of 1997 is etched like an indelible scar in Bulgarian memory. Imagine receiving your paycheck and having to run, literally run, to the supermarket knowing that by evening it will be worth half as much. This is not hyperbole. In February 1997, Bulgaria collapsed into a terrifying spiral of hyperinflation. The banking system, run by former communist officials, had made massive loans to friends and to bankrupt companies. To cover the gaps, the central bank printed money without pause. Prices rose 240% in a single month, and inflation topped 2,000% over the year. A lifetime of savings was wiped out in weeks. In that moment of despair, Bulgaria took a drastic decision that still shapes the country today. It established a currency board. The mechanism is brutal. Bulgaria tied the hands of its central bank by pegging the lev to a strong foreign currency at a fixed rate. They chose the Deutsche Mark. The message was, "Don't trust us, trust the Bundesbank." When Germany joined the euro, the peg transferred automatically. Since then, the value of the lev has been frozen. €1 is exactly worth 1.95583 lev, always. So even today, Bulgaria has its own physical currency, but not a monetary policy. The central bank cannot decide what the lev is worth. It only guarantees that it will always equal that precise fraction of the euro. The truth is, Bulgaria has been using the euro indirectly for 27 years through a local currency that acts as a mask. The lev is a ghost currency, lev in name only, but behaving like a euro, importing the monetary policy decided in Frankfurt. But this system comes at a very high price. To maintain a fixed exchange rate without the economic might of Germany, Bulgaria imposed decades of brutal austerity on itself. Unable to devalue or to print money, the state cut everything. Low public wages, minimal pensions, healthcare investment pared to the bone. Bulgaria achieved macroeconomic stability, balanced accounts, low debt, but at the cost of social welfare. This explains the elite's push for official entry. If we must abide by the ECB's rules, we might as well sit at the table where those decisions are made, instead of waiting outside. They want to turn a passive constraint into active participation. Bulgarian Eurosceptics counter that seat at the table is a mere optical illusion. They argue that, with an economy worth less than 1% of the Eurozone's GDP, Sofia's voice will be politically inaudible, and that decisions will continue to be taken by giants like Germany, France, and Italy. But sitting at that table is not a free choice born today. It is the fulfillment of a contract signed nearly 20 years ago by a figure who seems to have stepped out of a novel. And now we come to the political heart of the matter, the reason why many Bulgarians feel backed into a corner. A few months ago, in the squares of Sofia, the opposition was calling for a referendum. Let us vote, let the people decide. The response from the Constitutional Court and the EU was blunt. No, you cannot. You have already decided. But when? The answer is hidden in a document signed almost 20 years ago. The trap was sprung between 2005 and 2007 at the moment of EU accession. The accession treaty was negotiated under the government of Simeon II of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Simeon was the last Tsar of Bulgaria, later exiled by the communists. He returned 50 years later, founded a party, and was democratically elected Prime Minister. He is the only monarch in history to have regained power through the ballot box. It was he who led the country toward Europe. In that moment of collective euphoria, the goal was to enter the Western Club in order to escape post-Soviet poverty. But the treaty contained a binding clause. Adopting the euro was not an option, it was an obligation. Once the technical criteria were met, entry was to be automatic. Citizens, distracted by the joy of accession and by European funds, were never told about the fine print. No one said, "By signing this, you are giving up future monetary sovereignty forever." Today, that clause has become a debt that must be paid. This is where the anger of those who wanted a vote today comes from. They look at Denmark. It is in the EU, but without the euro. Why? Because in 1992, Denmark, rich, stable, and with strong bargaining power, rejected the Maastricht Treaty in a referendum. To avoid losing it, Brussels granted an opt-out, the written right not to adopt the euro. But with the major enlargement of 2004, Europe's stance changed. The door was closed to exceptions. To avoid a two-speed Europe, Brussels ruled that there would be no concessions for new members. They had to accept the full package. This means that once the economic criteria are met, adopting the single currency becomes mandatory, requiring only final political approval. Bulgaria in 2007, paw and cap in hand, had no power to negotiate. At this point, you might ask, so why do Poland, Hungary, or the Czech Republic still have their own currencies? The answer is a subtle political loophole. The treaty says they must adopt the euro, but it does not say when. Warsaw and Budapest have adopted the perpetual postponement strategy. They deliberately avoid entering the technical preparatory mechanisms, such as ERM2, thereby effectively freezing the process. Bulgaria, by contrast, chose to comply and to accelerate. One final detail shows just how much the elite wants this entry. To join the euro, inflation must be low. In 2023 to 2024, Bulgaria's was too high. How did they solve it? Through accounting engineering endorsed by the institutions. The rule says inflation must not exceed by too much the average of the three most virtuous countries. but some had inflation so low that the target became unattainable. Bulgaria asked for and obtained the exclusion of those two virtuous countries from the calculation, raising the benchmark so it could pass beneath it. Technically, it is legal. Politically, it demonstrates iron will. Bulgaria's books are in order, public debt at 23% of GDP, but it is an order achieved by starving public spending, keeping wages and services to a minimum to please Brussels. But let's leave the treaties aside. If you ask the housewife in Sofia or the pensioner in Plovdiv what worries them, they will answer with one word: prices. The fear is that with the switch to the euro, the cost of living will explode, that shopkeepers will round up price lists, eroding wages that are already among the lowest in the EU. Is this fear justified? To find out, we must acknowledge that Bulgaria has an advantage, a crystal ball a few hundred kilometres away. Croatia joined the Eurozone on the 1st of January 2023. It is a Balkan country with a tourism-dependent economy similar to Bulgaria. Looking at Zagreb is like seeing Bulgaria's future in advance. The macroeconomic data tell a story of success. The effect of the currency change on overall inflation was barely 0.4%. But then there is real life. And there the cappuccino effect happened. That is, an unjustified rise in small, everyday prices caused by crafty upward rounding at the moment of conversion. This phenomenon does not affect everyone equally. The history of the euro teaches us that there are two ways to make the transition. On one hand, there is the chaotic model, seen in Italy in 2002 and replicated by Croatia in 2023. The problem was a mentally awkward conversion rate and an economy heavily reliant on cash. In that context, shopkeepers and cafe owners took advantage to round up their price lists. In the early days of January 2023, Croats witnessed this wild rounding. A coffee that cost 10 to 11 kuna, about €1.40, was often rounded to €1.50, €1.80, or even €2. For an economist, 40 cents is negligible, but for the person who drinks that coffee every morning, it is an instant perceived increase of 20 to 30%. And this doesn't even include all the other consumer goods. On the other hand, there are the Baltic countries, which experienced almost no price impact. Why? Because they have digitized economies where almost everything is paid by card, and governments that imposed strict controls before the conversion, not after. Croatia moved late. The government had to intervene in panic, threatening blacklists and inspectors. But in a free market, once prices rise, they rarely fall back. And Bulgaria, with its large shadow economy, risks ending up among the rounders. The government has promised apps to report price hikes, but the worry is that these will be toothless weapons. Joining the euro will bring long-term benefits. Croatian tourism boomed, but the ticket price is a receipt shock that always hits the weakest groups hardest. Yet there is a far greater danger than paying 20 cents more for a coffee. It concerns the money we have in the bank. Before we reveal that, if you found this video informative, support us with a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell. And remember our new channel, America vs. Europe, where we rank all European countries, the United States and Canada according to different factors. The uncomfortable truth is that the euro, after 20 years, is still a one-legged giant. It is an incomplete system. We are not the ones saying it, experts are. To understand the problem, let us look at the United States. If Mississippi, one of America's poorest states, is hit by a devastating crisis, it does not fail alone. The federal government steps in automatically. Taxes collected in California and New York are transferred to Mississippi to pay benefits, pensions, and to rescue local banks. There is a fiscal union, a marriage with a common bank account. In the Eurozone, that mechanism does not exist. We are flatmates in the same building, we use the same currency. But if one of us loses a job, the others are not obliged to cover for them. At best, they lend money, asking in return for the keys to the house and starvation-level austerity. Bulgaria has entered a monetary union without a fiscal union. So, if tomorrow a crisis breaks out that hits Eastern Europe, Bulgaria will be exposed. It will not be able to devalue the currency to make goods competitive. nor print money to stimulate the economy. But the more attentive would object, haven't we already said that Bulgaria cannot devalue even now? True. It has been living in that situation for 30 years, and in July 2020 it went even further. It joined the European exchange rate mechanism too, the waiting room of the Eurozone, formally promising, "We will never touch the peg again." From this, you understand that the key issue is not simply whether it is right or wrong for Bulgaria to enter the euro now, but rather knowing all the steps that were taken in that direction. In any case, there is a fundamental difference between not touching the exchange rate and never being able to do it again. Today, that rigidity is still a sovereign choice based on a law of the Bulgarian parliament. In an extreme national emergency, a war, an economic cataclysm, Sofia still holds the exit keys in its pocket. It could, at a very high cost, pass an emergency law, break the fixed peg, and reclaim monetary freedom. It is an extreme option, but it remains a legal option. By entering the euro, those keys are handed to Frankfurt and melted into metal. The process becomes irreversible. Bulgaria moves from a voluntary limitation to an eternal constraint. Those opposed to membership argue, while Poland has preserved the flexibility to devalue, and in fact grows faster than us, we are permanently bricking up the only remaining safety exit. And there will be no automatic check from Berlin or Paris to save us. The real risk has a name that makes bankers tremble. Cyprus 2013. Cyprus is the perfect example. A small economy tied to the east, with banks bloated by foreign capital, often Russian, just like Bulgaria. When Cypriot banks collapsed, Europe changed the rules. It did not rescue Cypriots with the money of European taxpayers. It introduced the bail-in, meaning, did the bank fail? We take the money to save it from customers' accounts. Those with more than 100,000 euros saw part of their savings confiscated. What happened in Cyprus is now law across the EU. Bulgaria's banking system is stable today, but it has a turbulent past and operates in a context of corruption above the EU average. By joining the euro, Bulgarian banks come under the direct supervision of the ECB. That is good for transparency, but it also means that if black holes appeared in the accounts, Bulgarian depositors could be called on to foot the bill. Finally, there is the competitiveness trap. Without the ability to devalue and without foreign fiscal support, a poor country in the euro has only one way to compete with Germany: internal devaluation. Put simply, lower wages. If you cannot make the currency cheaper, you must make workers cheaper. But in a single market with open borders, if you push wages down too far, a simple thing happens: young people leave. They take a plane to Germany or the Netherlands. Bulgarian no supporters claim that Bulgaria risks cementing its destiny as a periphery, condemning itself to slow demographic desertification, trading economic flexibility for the rigidity of an overly strong currency. It is the supreme risk, joining the club of the rich while remaining poor, but with your hands tied. As we have seen, reality is never simply black or white. This story is not an argument to be treated like barroom chatter, nor is it something some pro-European or Eurosceptic politician can reduce to a soundbite. It is the culmination of a troubled historical process, of a national trauma, and of a complex geopolitical strategy. In fact, we must acknowledge that there are perfectly good reasons why almost half the country wants the euro. A young entrepreneur in Sofia feels it as a liberation. No more bank commission fees. For a family, it means more stable mortgage rates. For Black Sea tourism, it means welcoming millions of visitors without the barrier of currency conversion. The euro brings the promise of lasting stability, the certainty that savings will never again be burned up as they were in 1997. It is the promise of finally being Europe. But we have also seen the other side of the coin. The risk of rising living costs that hit the poorest hardest, the permanent loss of the monetary sovereignty that helped Poland grow faster, the danger of entering a banking system without automatic rescues, risking the transformation of Bulgaria into a motionless periphery, incapable of responding to shocks. Bulgaria is trading the freedom to make its own mistakes for the security of being tied to others. It is buying life insurance against political instability and Russian influence. while surrendering all future economic flexibility. They have chosen to put on what Thomas Friedman called the golden straitjacket. It holds you tight, it prevents you from moving freely, but it also keeps you standing when strong winds blow outside. The question we leave you with today is a hard one, and we must admit that we do not have a definitive answer either. If it had been your decision to make, what would you have done? Would you have chosen the Polish model, keep sovereignty, retain the freedom to devalue and take risks on your own? Or would you have taken the Bulgarian path, bind your hands forever, but anchor yourself to a safer harbour? Bulgaria has made its choice. Whether it was an act of foresight or of desperation, only history will tell. Let us know in the comments. We are genuinely curious to read your perspective. To fully understand this video, we strongly recommend watching this other one, where we reveal 5 Eurozone countries that experienced a terrible financial crisis and show how they got out of it. That's all for this video. See you next time.